Joe Mason came home later than usual that evening. The court hearing had dragged on, and then he had to sort through some papers at the office. When he entered the house, he took off his jacket, and as he walked past the living room, he saw Shelley on the couch. She was engrossed in her phone and did not even pay attention to his appearance. That was odd. She'd always greeted him before, lifted her head, smiled, asked him how his day was going. He put his keys on the table and headed for the kitchen. Maybe she's tired after her shift, Joe thought as he poured himself a glass of water. But anxiety had already crept into his mind. Something had changed in their relationship in recent weeks. Shelley had started staying late at work a lot, saying the hospital was understaffed. But that excuse did not seem convincing. She used to be so frank with him, but now her eyes were distracted and her demeanor aloof. "Shelley?" he called, stepping out into the living room. She flinched and quickly blocked her phone screen as if caught doing something inappropriate. "Oh, hey. How was your day?" Her voice was strained and her smile was insincere. "Long day," he replied, taking a seat next to her. "How are you?" "Tired. I think I'll go to bed early tonight." "Is something wrong?" he asked cautiously. "No, nothing is wrong," she said, rising from the couch. "Just a lot of work." She kissed him on the cheek and went upstairs, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Joe felt a muffled, unpleasant residue. He had known this woman for over 20 years and felt that something was wrong. The next day, Joe returned home a little earlier than usual. He wanted to catch Shelley when she was not expecting him to be there to see how she was acting. As he entered the house, he heard her voice from the upstairs bedroom. She was talking to someone on the phone, and although her tone was quiet, she was laughing like a girl in love for the first time. Joe walked up the stairs, trying to tread noiselessly. The bedroom door was closed. He froze at the opening and heard her say, "I miss you too." No, he did not suspect anything yet. "Yes, soon." Something inside him clenched. Joe felt his heart sink. He stood there as if petrified, listening to his wife, with whom he had lived for over 20 years, chirping sweetly with another man. When the conversation ended and he heard her hang up the phone, Joe silently made his way back downstairs. His head was buzzing with thoughts. He needed to think things through. That night, Joe had hardly slept at all. There were 1,000 questions swirling around in his head. Who was this man? How long has this been going on? Why is she doing this? He could find no answers and felt powerless. The next morning, while Shelley was still asleep, Joe logged onto the shared computer and started checking their bank accounts. And then he discovered something strange. Over the past few weeks, Shelley had transferred significant amounts of money to an unknown account. "Holy shit," he whispered. The accounts were scattered across various small banks, which looked suspicious. This was not just flirting anymore. There was money involved. That same day, Joe decided to seek help. He called his friend, Bill, who was great at and she asked transferring money to unknown accounts. "Give me a couple days, and I'll dig up what I can," Bill promised. Joe hung up the phone and felt a surge of anger. He'd been betrayed, and he sat there and could do nothing. But now he was determined. He would find out the truth, no matter how bitter it was. When Bill called 2 days later, his voice was serious. "You were right, Joe. Her lover is Dr. William Connor. He works with her at the hospital, and it seems they going to elope together." Joe felt his heart sink again. Suddenly everything fell into place. The night shifts, the money transfers, the secret phone calls. He found it hard to breathe. "One more thing," Bill added. "I found evidence that they preparing the paperwork to rent an apartment in Pittsburgh. It looks like they going to be leaving as early as next week." Joe listened in silence as his life fell apart. He wanted to scream, but instead he only said quietly, "Thanks, Bill." He hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time. Now he knew for sure that his wife had betrayed him. Only one question remained. What was he going to do about it? In the morning, Joe woke up with a heavy heart. The events of the last few days hung over him like a black cloud, and he felt the situation was spiraling out of control. While Shelley was still asleep upstairs, he checked their accounts again and was convinced of the worst. A substantial amount of money, almost 80% of their savings, had been withdrawn from their joint investment account. $200,000. It was money they'd been saving for years, for their children's education, for travel after retirement, for future security. And now it's all gone. For what? For her running off with her lover? Now he realized it was time to get lawyers involved. He called his colleague at the firm and asked him to prepare a temporary restraining order, TRO, to use the funds. The paperwork had to be done quickly. It was his only chance to stop Shelley and her lover. With the legal issues temporarily resolved, Joe decided to visit Shelley's parents, Mark and Sally. They lived about 30 miles away, and Joe hoped to get answers to his questions. Did they know anything about the affair? Did they support her in it? When he pulled up to their house, both cars were parked in the driveway. Mark opened the door and, seeing Joe, nodded briefly as if he'd been expecting him. "Come on in," he said quietly, stepping aside. Inside, Sally was sitting in the kitchen, holding a cup of coffee. She looked tired and worried, as if she already knew why Joe had come. "What did you know?" Joe asked, not bothering with greetings. Sally looked away and nervously fixed her hair. "Shelley told me she was seeing William," she admitted. "But she assured me that she just needed a change and that she did not want to hurt you." "Did not want to be hurt?" Joe snorted with a bitter chuckle. "She stole all our savings and abandoned our family for some idiot." "What do you call that? Saving feelings?" "We were hoping she'd change her mind," Mark said, wringing his hands. "We thought this was a crisis, that she'd stop before she went too far." Joe froze, shocked. He could not believe that his own father-in-law and mother-in-law knew what was going on, but kept silent. "You knew, and you did not tell me anything?" His voice broke into a scream. "How could you? I trusted you." Sally clenched her hands into fists, her eyes filled with tears. "We did not want to make things worse, Joe," she whispered. She believed she had found love. "We thought she was just confused." "Confused?" "She ruined our marriage," he said, clenching his teeth. "And you watched it all this time and kept quiet." Mark sighed heavily and put his hand on his wife's shoulder. "Joe, if she comes back and apologizes, can you forgive her?" The words hurt Joe more than he had expected. He tried to imagine Shelley coming back, them discussing what had happened, maybe going to therapy, trying to make things right. But the thought seemed pointless. Everything that held their marriage together had been destroyed. "No," he said coldly. It was too late. Back in the car, Joe closed his eyes for a moment and slapped his hands on the steering wheel. Anger swept over him again, but he knew he had to stay focused. Everything now depended on whether he could freeze the money and prepare for the upcoming trial. His phone rang. It was Bill. "Bad news," Bill said. Shelley had already transferred the money to a bank in Pittsburgh. They were obviously preparing for something big. Joe listened in silence, feeling something breaking inside him. "But there is one piece of good news," Bill continued. "Your court order will freeze all transactions. They will not be able to withdraw that money without your consent until the trial." "Great," Joe exhaled. "That gives me time." Hanging up the phone, he looked at the road in front of him. "Now I'm ready to face them in court," he thought as he turned on the ignition. Not only did he have to fight for his money, but he had to deal with Shelley once and for all. After a difficult conversation with Shelley's parents and hearing from Bill, Joe headed for the gym. It was the place that always helped him vent his pent-up anger and regain his mental clarity. He did not know whether to leave it in the hands of the lawyers or to try to influence the situation himself. But he knew he had to hit the heavy bag now until the storm in his head subsided. He changed in the locker room and headed toward the workout area. The hum of the TV, the rumble of the exercise machines, and the chatter of the visitors created a noise that was strangely calming. Joe put on his gloves and began hitting the bag relentlessly, the anger inside him spilling out with each blow. After a while, he felt eyes on him. Turning around, he spotted Clara Barton, Shelley's longtime co-worker and friend. She was trying to sneak out of the gym through the back exit, but he was in time to call out to her. "Clara, wait a minute." The woman froze for a moment, then reluctantly turned toward him, her gaze expressing discomfort. "Joe, I did not mean to intrude. I thought you'd hate to see me," she said, lowering her eyes. "Did you know?" Joe stepped closer, but tried to keep his voice calm. "Did you know she was cheating on me?" Clara sighed, as if she'd been carrying a heavy burden for a long time. "Yes, I did know." She told me months ago that she was having an affair with Connor. I tried to talk her out of it, but she was already too deep into it. Why did not you say anything to me? He asked, looking her straight in the eye. I was afraid you'd react badly, she admitted. Shelley thought you'd freak out and do something rash. I'm her friend, Joe. It was important to me to be on her side, even if I did not agree with her. Her words stunned him. It seemed that even those who knew the truth were willing to defend Shelley instead of helping him. But looking at Clara, he suddenly felt a strange feeling. She did not look like an enemy, more like someone who was confused about a difficult situation herself. I just wanted someone to tell me the truth, Joe said quietly. Clara nodded and took a step closer. I understand. I wish I'd told you sooner. There was an awkward pause between them, but something in her words and in her gaze was sincere. Joe sensed it. If you want to talk or just spill it all out, I'm here, she offered. Maybe that's just what I need, he said, feeling suddenly relieved. An hour later, they were sitting in a cafe near the gym. Joe could not remember the last time he had such a relaxed conversation with someone. He told Clara about everything that had been going on, the betrayal, the feelings that had consumed him the last few days. Clara listened attentively, not interrupting, only occasionally asking questions. She was sincere, not giving empty advice, just being there for him. I not understand how we got to this point, he admitted. We'd been together for 20 years. How could she ruin everything so easily? Maybe she was confused too, Clara suggested. People sometimes make terrible decisions, thinking it's the path to happiness. She reached out and touched his palm. The gesture was unexpected, but not at all unpleasant. Joe, you deserve better, she said softly. He looked at her, and something in his chest trembled. It was not just comfort. It was a feeling he had not felt in a long time. In her eyes, he saw an interest and desire that Shelley had not shown in a long time. Later, they went back to the gym. Joe felt much lighter than he had in the morning. They spent some more time doing exercises, and every time he caught Clara's gaze in the mirror, a smile involuntarily appeared on his face. When she came up to him after her workout, he already knew he did not want to let her go so easily. Do you want to come over to my place? Clara suggested, wiping her forehead with a towel. Her offer sounded confident, without any hints or tension. Joe hesitated for only a second before nodding. Yeah, I would not say no to that. They crossed the road and went up to her apartment. Clara was single, and her apartment was cozy and furnished without being too fancy. But Joe barely paid attention to the furnishings. All he cared about at that moment was the woman standing in front of him. Clara stepped closer and, without waiting for words, pulled him to her. He knew it was wrong, that everything was happening too fast, but he did not care. That passion, that spark, everything he had not felt in his marriage in so long, had finally found its way out. When they were in bed, Joe felt his body relax after days of tension and anger. Clara was more than just a comfort to him. She made him feel like himself and let him forget about all his problems. And when it was over and they were lying side by side, panting and laughing, Joe felt for the first time in a long time that he could move on. He would probably make many more mistakes along the way, but he felt better now than he had at any time in the last few days. He turned to Clara and said quietly, "Thank you for being there for me." Clara smiled and pulled him closer. "This is just the beginning, Joe." The day of the trial came, and Joe felt a mixture of anger and determination. He had chosen a strict suit to look put together and confident, but inside he was gnawing with anxiety. This was not just a day to decide on money. Today he would be facing Shelley face to face for the first time since she left, and he was going to see her with the man she had destroyed their marriage for. He entered the courtroom with an attorney from his firm, Mildred Hoover, the best in the business. A meeting with Shelley was inevitable, and Joe wanted to be prepared for anything. When he saw her, something in his chest clenched painfully. Shelley looked the same as she always did, well-groomed and relaxed, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. But Joe did not have time to get a good look at her, because he immediately noticed who was standing next to her. William Connor, here, Loa. Connor held himself aloof, as if he wanted to show that he did not care what was going on. He offered Shelley no support and looked like he regretted coming. Joe could not help but gloat. He already wants to run away, and this is just the beginning. The court hearing began, and Vanguard's attorney explained why the financial transaction had been frozen. The request to transfer $200,000 had come from an unregistered computer in an unusual location. In addition, the bank noted that the funds were being transferred to William Connor's personal account, raising suspicions of fraud. Mildred performed masterfully, arguing that Shelley had used the joint funds without Joe's consent and that their movement should be regulated as part of the divorce proceedings. The money is joint property, Mildred firmly stated. My client is entitled to their protection. When it was Shelley's turn to testify, she looked broken. At first, she tried to justify herself. I did not realize the transfer would cause such a problem. Connor just asked me to help him with his debts. But her voice shook and she looked at Joe. I made a mistake, she whispered, barely perceptible. Connor, who was standing nearby, stepped aside and no longer looked in her direction. The judge noticed the gesture and made a note in his notes. It was clear to everyone. Connor was ready to leave Shelley as soon as the situation became difficult. After the session, Joe was standing in the hallway when Shelley approached him. Can I talk to you? She asked quietly. Talk? He looked at her with a cold chuckle. About what? About how you ruined everything we built. Shelley lowered her head, her eyes filling with tears. I know I do not deserve forgiveness. I thought I had found a new love, that this was my chance for something better. But I was wrong. Joe crossed his arms over his chest, taking his time to answer. So what now? You think you can just go back like nothing happened? Please, Joe, she begged. Give me a chance to make things right. I want to go back to you, to our family. He felt two forces fighting inside him. Part of him wanted to forgive her, to take her back, just so he would not feel this pain anymore. But the other part knew, if he took her back, she might betray him again. He took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. No, Sadie, you've chosen your path. Now live with it. With those words, he turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the court hallway. Several weeks had passed since the trial, and Joe felt that the stone that had been lying on his soul was finally beginning to melt. He was no longer waiting for Shelley to call, no longer looking for explanations, or running through his head the moments where he could have done things differently. That was the end of it. Shelley had made her choice, and Joe had made his choice to leave her in the past. But another woman had taken her place. Clara. She became not just a comfort, but someone who helped him believe that life goes on after the collapse of a marriage. Their relationship developed rapidly, but there was nothing artificial about it. Everything seemed natural. Morning runs together, dinners for two, nights full of passion. But there was more to it than that. They were learning to trust each other and to open up to each other anew. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, do not forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.